What's going on, everybody? Hotep to the family. Ashe to all my people out there. Welcome to another episode of My Unapologetic Perspective here on the Mighty Motivation Network. This is the podcast where we give our point of view of controversial topics from our experience, Black history, and knowledge as African Americans. In the words of Maya Angelou, do your best until you know better, and when you know better, do better. So it's important to search for information to discover what you don't know so you can discover your best you. I am your host, Martre Stevens. To the right of me is Shaquan Battle.
What up? Hey, I got a question.
Hey.
What does Ashe mean? Because I Googled it. You know, Google only give you suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me a couple different suggestions of what it means.
Ashe is is basically acknowledging the force of the spirit. It would also be considered similar to Amen in Christianity. And to the right of Shaquan Battle is Jerome Battle.
What's up? Hey, I noticed that you say Martre Stevens at the beginning.
I do. I've been doing it for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I guess when it came to motivational speaking, people who were booking me seeing my name on Facebook as Martre Stevens and started calling me that. So I began to introduce myself as Martre.
I like it. You know I like that anyway.
So Baker is for the homies and Martre is my professional.
Good.
My professional.
And for the ones that don't know, Dad wanted you to recognize that we was black by our names.
Absolutely. You ain't gonna find a white Shaquan or a white Martre nowhere.
Let's go back to the sponsors for a second. The world is opening back up. It's time that your closet open back up as well. Shop with Cool Breeze Kicks for your everyday need to feel fresh again. If you're a person who is always looking for the latest sneakers to express yourself, if you're a person who loves opening up a shoebox and enjoying that fresh shoe look and shoe smell, if you're a person who lays their outfit on the bed and thinks, which shoes should I kill them with today? Then shop at Cool Breeze Kicks. Follow on Instagram at CB_Kicks with a Z. Again, that's on Instagram at CB_CICKZ. Follow them, support Tyron Staples. Love you, kid. Doing a great job with your company.
Shout out to Cool Breeze Kit.
Absolutely. Before we also get started, I wish I had a round of applause. I'm gonna get it one day here on my laptop. Round of applause to the Milwaukee Bucks for winning the World Championship. Congratulations to our Greek brother, Giannis Antetokounmpo, who got his ring. Congratulations to Chris Middleton. Congratulations to Drew Holiday. Congratulations to my man Bobby Portis, Bobby Buckets, man. He got him a ring. Shout outs to Bobby.
Hey, I seen a lot of people, a lot of Nigerians saying that Greek Freak is confused. That he ain't Greek. He Nigerian.
Well, all we know is he is a brother. He's black. So shout out to them. Another congratulations to box office tickets to our brother LeBron James with Space Jam. Watched it last night. Great for kids and great for grown-ups. No need to compare it to the first one. It's not the first one. It stands on its own, and it's important for me to see that black family again on television, which he incorporated within Space Jam, and black lessons. The lesson he was teaching throughout this movie was for black parents especially. So congratulations to our brother LeBron James on the success of that movie.
It is. Bron always does a great job of giving you black values as a father for a man that didn't grow up with a father.
That's right.
And that's why it was important during this movie because he showed that throughout the movie with a little of his story incorporated.
Yeah.
Great job. Great writing.
Did Jay and Marianne go to this movie with you?
No.
Oh, I was going to say, because you talking about black family and fathers. I didn't get an invite. I got a picture after the movie.
Well, they went to the movies. Me and my daughter watched it here.
I'm just wondering why I didn't get the
Yeah,
invite.
we had a battle family outing last night.
My last name battle? I didn't get an invite.
Granddad ain't get an invite.
The second and third generation.
Okay, I was saying. I like movies too.
He wanted to see Space Jam.
Yeah, I like popcorn.
Hey, look, I know what he would have said when you text him to go.
What else it say?
Nah, man, y'all go have fun, man.
Because I know y'all probably made that decision at the last minute.
No, I actually I planned it 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So he had 2 weeks to tell you.
I got nothing.
I tried to help him out. I said it was last minute.
Oh, we already went. Wow. I mean, I like movies. I probably would have said, "Nah, y'all go in and have fun," but it's the invite.
That's the thought.
Before the fact, not after the fact.
Absolutely.
Okay, but it's
well, we're gonna have a Father Sunday one day. Then we'll do that.
Am I getting the invite?
Well, you the father, so
I can't tell.
You started this.
Absolutely. So we're gonna piss some people off again today.
That's what we do.
That's what we do.
That's what we do.
Oh, we might get pissed off. One of the two.
And that happened 2 weeks ago. That happened 2 weeks ago.
So a little bit of getting pissed off, and since we're gonna get pissed off, we're gonna piss other people off as well. We're gonna go ahead and spread that. I'm reading an article. Hours after monuments to 2 Confederate generals were removed, a 3rd statue came down Saturday afternoon. During a special emergency meeting, the Charlottesville City Council decided to take down the Meriwether Lewis, William Clark statue. They tweeted a photo of officials whisking it away just before 2:45 p.m. The council unanimous 5-0 vote came after crowds cheered when the bronze statues depicting General Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson were carted away Saturday morning. Nearly 4 years after white supremacists and neo-Nazi groups stormed the Virginia college town to protest the city's planned removal of the Lee Monument, about 200 residents, spectators, and Black Lives Matter supporters came out Saturday morning to witness the moment the first 2 statues were taken down. So real quick, brief history. Even though hundreds of Confederate statues have been taken down, there are still thousands that stand. They're still currently standing. Throughout history, the states with the largest cluster of Confederate monuments, Virginia being 244, Texas 199, South Carolina 194, North Carolina 169, Mississippi 147. The vast majority of them future Robert E. Lee, about 220 statues of Robert E. Lee himself. Confederate President Jefferson Davis, about 145, and Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Jackson, about 108. Some of those statues have came down, but there's, like I said, there are still a lot still standing that we need to go ahead and get them taken down. But y'all thoughts on the statues being removed?
It needed to happen, and it needs to continue to happen. It's long overdue. You have a lot of people that will talk about the fact that removing the statues could possibly erase history, which I think is ludicrous, and not the rapper. Obviously, removing the statues cannot erase history. There's no way you can erase decades of slavery. There's no way that you can erase decades of discrimination and racism and murder that continues today. There's no way you can erase it.
You could not talk about it, but you can't erase it.
You can't erase it. The other thing is, it's in the history books. That's the position that we talked about last week.
Right.
That they put blacks in the history of the United States, is in that slavery mode. So how can you erase it? You can't erase it. And taking down the statues does not erase it. When we talk about statues, we're not just talking about the statues themselves, but let's talk about why they were even erected. Let's talk about where they're located, because I think that's huge too. Because most of the statues are located somewhere near the courthouse, which is a place that we know that blacks are treated unfairly on a daily basis.
Right. That's
when you think about criminal justice.
Really good point.
So you putting the statues in a place signifying what we're going to do to you when you come to court at this courthouse. That's one. The other thing is, how many statues of Martin Luther King do we have in front of courthouses?
Very few. And
so at the end of the day, you erected those statues for a specific targeted reason. It's to instill certain things to the people that see them. Whether it be the pride of the white generation or the fear of the black. One of the two. It's a reason that you erected those statues and put them where you put them. That needs to stop. The way you stop them is by removing. Now, I know people talk about history, and generally is historic. And you're gonna have people, include myself. We talked about it last week or a week before last on this podcast, where he was not a supporter of slavery. He actually freed his slaves. One of his main slaves, I think his name's Lee Mack, wrote a book. However, he fought for slavery. Although, according to him, he was just doing his duty. I get that. But do you really think that's why they erected a statue of him? Right. Is because he was against slavery? Do you think that's why they erected the statue? Of course not. Of course not. That's not why they erected the statue of him in all these different states and all these different locations. Obviously, it was because he fought for the side of slavery. It needs to come down. They need to come down. Now, what you can do is you can do the same thing that you're doing with statues of like Martin Luther King. Put them in some museum somewhere where for people that want to see them and want to know what they were about. Because obviously, I do think it's important to know the characters. I just don't think they need to be 17-foot statues in my face when I go to the courthouse. So I agree that they need to come down. I do not agree that taking them down erases history. But it needs to happen. It needs to continue to happen.
Like Denzel said, I don't care what you do. Just don't let me come down here and find you doing this. But like you said, though, most of them are super big. They at courthouses, they at roundabouts, letting you know, we might have lost the war, but we still in charge here, boy.
Right.
That's right. Absolutely.
That's what it's about.
Rob, let me read a quote from Robert E. Lee. I think it, however, a great evil to the white man than to think. I think it's a great evil to the white man than to the black race. He was speaking about slavery being bad for white people, but good for black people.
Because it was worrisome for them to control the slaves.
So
absolutely.
That's the type of person that you're dealing with that's saying, okay, slavery, it is wrong for us to have slaves, but it's right to be able to put blacks into their position. To keep them in their place in this country. He also said the blacks are immeasurably better off here than in Africa, morally, socially, and physically. The painful discipline that they are undergoing is necessary for their instruction as a race. I hope and will prepare and lead them to better things. How long their subjection may be necessary is known and ordered by a wise, merciful providence. Their emancipation will sooner result from the mild and melting influence of Christianity than the storms and tempests of theory controversy. His argument, again, is that slavery was bad for white people, but good for black people. That alone is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. But you're going to hear a lot of people say that he wasn't a cruel master because he didn't abuse his slaves physically.
Or that to the view of others.
Right. So we'll get to that in a second. Right, he might not have abused them by his own hand. From what we know, we don't know for sure, but by writings, he didn't take action by his own hand to abuse slaves. But he did something actually worse. That was actually worse that we talked about on this podcast before. Is instead of beating the slaves, the enslaved Africans, he would sell them.
That's right. He
would sell the mother from the father. He would sell the kids away. Because he did not respect black families. Again, this is a few years before the Emancipation Proclamation hit. So right after enslaved Africans was free, that's even harder to find your family after freedom.
That's right.
So when you sell somebody deep south or to the Caribbean islands or the West Indies, it was harder to find your family from there. Which is, I'd rather take the beating than to separate me from my family. So. In cruelty, he was worse in that aspect. One of the things that's floating around is that, like you said, that he freed his slaves. Correct. But let's talk about the manner in which that happened.
That's right.
Robert E. Lee's mother and stepfather died. and he inherited the slaves that they owned. And in Robert E. Lee's stepfather's will, it said that in 5 years, those enslaved Africans were to be free. Robert E. Lee goes to the court twice to petition for even an extension on this, or even to do away with it altogether, because they were in debt.
That's right.
So he was denied that access, but not before 2 enslaved Africans ended up escaping from the plantation, which they actually had plans to revolt, but they escaped and they were captured in Maryland and brought back. By Robert E. Lee's authority, he had his overseers beat 50 lashes into those escaped Africans. And then after beating those escaped Africans, he then takes salt water and pour it onto the wounds, right, which was actually made it a lot worse. And by doing that, they asked them, he asked, why did y'all, run from the plantation? And their thing was, we're just as free as you, according to your stepfather who said that we're supposed to be free. That's right. So he didn't actually free. Virginia had to force him to free those enslaved Africans due to the documentation of the will. So a lot of people say he freed his enslaved Africans. Oh yeah, because it was in the will, in the documentation of his stepfather, that he had to do so. If that was not in the will, those enslaved Africans would have not be free.
At least at that time.
At that time. So
that's right.
And actually, the Emancipation Proclamation had passed, and he still didn't free his slaves. They actually had to force him to do so.
Until his wife.
Right. So another thing he did, it was common for the Confederacy and the Union soldiers, if they captured somebody, a white military person, to exchange hostages. Mm-hmm. General Lee wasn't doing that with black soldiers. He either massacred them or he threw them back into slavery. In another letter, Lee wrote, "You will never prosper with blacks. You will never prosper with blacks." Which means, even if he thought that slavery was wrong, which in his writings he did, but he still subjected to slavery, he still did not believe that blacks was equal to whites.
Absolutely.
Which is another problem. He said that blacks were intelligent enough to vote. Sounds like something the Republicans are saying today.
Absolutely.
So a lot of narratives that are being painted is something that black people need to start debunking early on. So when they said he did many great things with his life, okay, he might have did. I known a bunch of gangbangers who might have walked the grandma across the street.
That's right.
Doesn't make them not a person who committed murder or a person who sell drugs to their people.
That's right.
So while he freed slaves, did he fight against slavery? Did he think black people were equal to him?
Nope. He did not.
Did owning slaves when he owned slaves, did he fight against slavery in the Civil War? If those answer is no, then F him.
Absolutely.
Absolutely F him.
I agree 100%.
Another thing that they like to say, he was a good slave master.
What does that mean?
In comparison to the bad slave master, that may sound like a good thing. But we have to stop that narrative right there. Because, again, if they own property and knew it was wrong to own property, but still did it, they're still guilty.
Absolutely. Slave master itself makes it wrong. So how can you be a good one?
So we're gonna cut it right there. We're gonna cut that narrative right there. There is no such thing as a good slave master.
That's right.
Now, were that slave master that was not as cruel as some other slave masters? Absolutely. But if somebody was to shoot you 1 time rather than 5 times, you still got shot. It still doesn't make it right. So in return, again, we're gonna do a segment. We're gonna call it, I want you to say it because I don't curse like that. But when I point to you, I want you to say the F word, F him. So after that statement,
fuck him.
So he was a good slave master. We're going to debunk that right there. Slavery wasn't that bad. It was another concept that they're trying to throw around.
That's right.
The Deep South is known for their extreme racism, and it seems that they want to keep that embedded in our minds, as you say. But
fuck him.
We can't throw away history.
Fuck him.
We need to learn from it. And this is something that George Bush said, a great nation does not hide its history. It faces its flaws and corrects them. 100% agree. If that's what the basis of these statues were doing. If you were to go up to these statues and it was to talk about how morally wrong slavery was, then
That's
okay.
right.
If it was to talk about these are the concepts and beliefs that we do not want to follow as a country, like Germany does when they have the concentration camps still there, when you go there, they teach that this is not what Germany stands for. If that was a thing, then okay, we can have a conversation. But when you glorify, not acknowledge, glorify these people, again, like you said, with the side statues, where they put them at, it's not correcting behavior.
It's continued behavior.
It's promoting.
It's teaching.
It's promoting it. So it's embedding in the minds to black people that this is your place. These are the people who put you in that place. Mm-hmm. And it's embedded in white people's minds, especially in the deep South.
That's right.
They're saying we have to remember who we are, which is white supremacy.
Absolutely.
And with the statues like New Orleans, what is 65% black?
65% black.
You have these statues of being glorified of slave owners.
Absolutely.
In black people's faces every day.
That's right.
And you had white people saying that, no, this is our history. Okay. On the other side of that, because if you got history, then we got history.
Right. That's right.
Our history is we have been oppressed for over 400 years.
Right.
So now I'm going to get a job or I'm going to school and I got to look at these monuments, these statues of people that owned my family members.
Right.
That's right.
That enslaved my family members, and you saying that's your history. Let's put a statue up of a person that owned other people.
Right. And it's not like, listen, I can care less what some of y'all do behind closed doors. You can call me the N-word. You can have your Confederate flags in your homes. Do whatever you want to do on your time. But when you have these statues in towns, I don't know if y'all noticed, coming up and through my neighborhood, there's a little Confederate flag on a sign out there. Mm-hmm. That's a representation of the town. That's right. Where black people, Native Americans, Hispanics live. So you're not preserving history for everybody. You're preserving history for white supremacy. Right. As Marlo said on The Wire, you want it to be one way.
That's right.
Because if you truly want to preserve history, then the same people wouldn't be arguing about the critical race theory that we talked about yesterday being in schools.
Absolutely.
Because you will want to talk about every piece of history, even the part that's not bad. But again, like Marlo said on The Wire, you want it to be one way, and to Dad, fuck you.
But that's the thing is, George Bush said that, about the history, but their history, America's history is made up. They had something called the Lost Cause.
The Lost Cause, which that's what they like to call it.
Which was a false narrative about the Confederacy, slavery, white supremacy, Reconstruction, and the KKK.
Yeah.
They produced their own history so their ancestors wouldn't look bad because, dog, y'all lost.
Right, absolutely.
And they said the war wasn't fought over slavery, as we talked about that many episodes ago, but it was to defend the 10th Amendment.
Well, here's the thing. When you hear black people say that the Civil War was not fought for slavery, yes, we're talking about the Union. Right. Because the Union like to make it feel like they were fighting for our freedom because they cared about us.
Right.
That's not true.
No.
They were fighting because the slavery was causing capitalism in the South. So it had to do with slaves, but it was about money at the end of the day. So for the South, it was about keeping their slaves so they could continue to become wealthy based off of their trade and growing tobacco, cotton, and all of these in different things. So when we use that theory, it's not against the Confederacy, it's against the Union to say y'all fight was not about slaves, it was about money. Mm-hmm. And slaves had something to do with the money. But when it comes to the South, it was absolutely about slavery because in order to have that capitalism that they was enjoying, you had to have slaves.
Which was a Civil War Part 2.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we begin to look at some of these concepts, even the Confederate flag, the flag that they're flying around today was not the flag of the Confederacy. Mm-hmm. The flag of the Confederacy actually looked a lot like the United States flag, and they ended up changing it because they were confused on the battlefield. So the Confederacy flag that you see people flying around today did not come into omission until after the loss of the Civil War and the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, especially during the Reconstruction period, where they were using this flag to separate from the black people and take away all of the new freedoms that they now have. So when you talk about we're preserving our history, that flag in particular, it comes into place during the Reconstruction period where blacks were booming and white people wanted to subject them or object their progress there in the South.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So just with them, you also had Jefferson Davis, who knew slavery was wrong, but still insisted on owning slaves. He also said that if any black soldiers fighting for the Union was captured, was going back into slavery, and said stupid stuff like, my own conviction as to Negro slavery are strong. It has its evils and abuses. We recognize the Negro as God, and God's book and God's laws and nature tell us to recognize him. Our inferior fitted expressly for servitude. You cannot transform the Negro into anything 1/10 as useful or as good as what slavery enables them to be. So Jefferson Davis,
fuck you.
Hey, my man Jefferson Davis also said slaves in America is moral, political, and social blessing.
Again, to Jefferson Davis,
fuck you.
And to Stonewall Jackson, owned slaves. So some people say he did Sunday school with the black people, and he was a devoted Christian. Any man that truly is a Christian and a man of God would have never owned slaves.
That's right.
His family agreed. His descendants of today, that his statue should come down because of what he represented. So to Stonewall Jackson,
fuck you. Absolutely. You know, the other thing that always surprises me when people bring up the relationship that somebody that we deem as being racist or discriminatory, they always bring up the fact that, well, he had a white grandson, a black grandson, or he had a black
most of them
son,
did,
or he had whatever. And you attributed that to the fact that he couldn't have been racist. No, he liked that one black.
Right.
Okay. He liked that one black person. Right. That has nothing to do with the race itself. That one black person he may have had some type of feeling or compassion for.
Right.
That one. That's it. That don't mean all you. Yeah. That just means this one.
I want to say something about that real quick, because it's a lot of things that a lot of white and black people don't understand about that concept. In the jail or the prison system today, if a officer was to have sex, or a police officer was to have sex with somebody like an inmate, that is considered rape, because by being property of the government, they cannot institute
can't use their authority
of content.
That's right.
Of content into sex. The same thing happens in slavery. A slave cannot say no to sex from a slave master.
That's right.
So that is considered rape. So when we talk about these slave owners who had concubines that were black, who may have had babies with black women, that is rape. That is right. Child molestation, because a lot of them were what we consider underage today.
That's right.
So 99% of our women that were enslaved were raped, molested, and exposed due to their slave masters. It was not consensual, because a slave cannot consent to sex. They can't say no.
Can't say no.
So we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. And we are back. If you're listening, go to YouTube, type in the Mighty Motivation Network, subscribe to the channel, share the channel, the Unapologetic Podcast. Go to Facebook, type in my unapologetic perspective, and hit the like button, share it with your friends, share it with your family. If you see these videos floating around on Facebook, Instagram, copy and paste the link, send it to one of your friends, one of your family members, and give us your unapologetic perspective in the comments. So we're going to move right along. We're going to talk about something that just recently, a recent analysis came out here in Virginia. We like to really cover things that specifically to Virginia, where we live at. The statues, we know Richmond and Charlottesville have a high number of those statues. But another thing that came out in the news last week was a newspaper analyst of state data shows that across Virginia, black drivers are the only racial or ethnic group stopped by police at a higher rate than their share of the population. Black drivers in Hampton roads across Virginia were also more likely to be stopped and searched by police than any other racial ethnic group. Y'all thoughts on driving while black?
You go first.
My experience, only speaking for me, growing up as a teenager, targeted several times. And I think the commission that came out and said that, it's no way these officers know what race these people are when he's pulling them over. You do.
Especially if it's during the daytime.
Right. Yeah. You do. And not only that, because the community that you're setting up in.
Yeah.
You know, we know most of the time cops only set up on one side of the city. Mm-hmm. Or on a major highway. But like you said, it's daytime, you can see. And by the vehicles.
Right.
So if you're driving a Mercedes-Benz, you're going to get pulled over because why are you driving a Mercedes-Benz? Mm-hmm. How are you driving a Mercedes-Benz? I don't even have a Mercedes-Benz is what the police officer what he's thinking. But on the other hand is 9 times out of 10, you think you're going to find something in that vehicle.
That's right.
So because their violations were Terry stops, which were, a light out. Mm-hmm. Tags need to be renewed, inspections, those things. And it said drivers that was based on suspicion of a driver, mm-hmm. Engaged in criminal activity.
Yep.
I got some interesting statistics for you. I had a friend that works for the state police, and I had him send me a text, which is why I hadn't even had a chance to put it on my laptop, because I asked him to get it to me by 11:30, and he did that right at 11:30 as I was pulling up. He sent it to me.
Cool.
And this was regarding driving while black. And it's funny because even now when I'm driving and I see a police officer have somebody pulled over, I look to see if they're black.
Yeah.
I mean, I
can't help it.
I look to see if they're black. Blacks are 20% more likely to be pulled over by police than whites. 1.5 to 2 times as often as white drivers to be searched, mm-hmm. even though they are less likely to be carrying guns, drugs, yep. or other illegal contraband. 30% less likely mm-hmm. to be carrying any of that. But yet we're 20% more likely mm-hmm. to be pulled over, and 1.5 to 2 times greater chances of being searched. So clearly, but let's just say it's not clear.
Okay.
Let's just say it's still not clear. Those numbers go down after dark.
Yeah, because you can't see them.
Because you can't see. So that means that a lot of people go, well, that's proof that they're not biased towards black drivers. No, idiots. It's the opposite.
Right.
Because now they don't know what race you are. They're pulling everybody over equally. Now it's equal now.
It looks equal.
It looks equal.
Yeah.
Because we can't see who the drivers are. That proves that in the daytime, they are pulling blacks over intentionally at a high rate. Now, you want to know how high rate? Let me give you some other numbers. There's over 225 million drivers in America. Mm-hmm. 64% are white. Only less than 13% are black. Mm-hmm. Yet we get pulled over 20% more.
That is a
so
high
it's
rate.
Less of us driving, but we get pulled over more. You can't tell me that's not racial profiling.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that. Mm-hmm. Here's the other thing. We are 75% more likely to get a ticket mm-hmm. versus them giving you a warning. You can't tell me that this is not systematic racism. Mm-hmm. You can't tell me that. We didn't make up the numbers. This is coming from the state police.
Right.
We didn't make these numbers up.
No, absolutely not.
Okay? So you can't tell me that this is not a problem, and you can't tell me that it's not systemic.
Right.
Obviously, it's systemic. Is when we keep saying deeply rooted. It ain't that deep. Trust me.
Right.
It ain't that. You don't have to go that far. Have an argument with a white person and see how deeply it is.
Yeah.
And come out really quick.
Right.
Boom. They're going to say something that's going to be racially divisive.
Right.
Real quick. Right. It's not deeply rooted, but it's because you have things like statues erected that's in your face every day.
Right.
You have, and I know we're going to get to this. You have in certain states where they are doing things on a regular basis. We talked about this last week. While we were eating hot dogs and celebrating Juneteenth Day, the Republicans were trying to pass over 400 bills in 32 different states mm-hmm. of voter suppression. And one of those states is Texas, which is one of those states that you mentioned still has a large number of statues like Robert E. Lee erected. Mm-hmm. And in those states, like Texas, they're trying to say that not everybody needs to vote.
Right.
So only people that we think are worthy, we meaning the white majority, are worthy of voting. Right. So we're going to talk about a little bit about how white privilege plays into what they're doing. I'm gonna give you an example. This one blew me away, and this is something that just happened recently that I think you guys probably heard about on the news. So you had during the riots on the Capitol, you had a white lady who spat in the face of a black lady who was protesting. She was there supporting Black Lives Matter at the time that they were rioting, and she spit in the black lady's face, and it was videoed. She yelled to the cops. Cops came over, detained the black lady, walked the white lady away. Black lady, what are you doing? She was the one who assaulted me. Well, where's your proof? I'm telling you this is what happened. There's other witnesses that are telling you what happened. Luckily, somebody videoed it, showed them the video. So they ended up arresting the white lady. But let me just tell you what the charges were. And this blows my mind. And the more I talk about this, of course, we talk about we're going to piss some people off. Well, some of these things piss me off. So the white lady was charged with several crimes, which included deprivation of rights, third-degree criminal attempt to commit assault, first-degree reckless endangerment, and risk of injury. Her punishment for these crimes, which did not include any relating to a hate crime, she was only ordered to enroll in a special program for first-time offenders, and she will have 2 years to complete 100 hours of anti-hate courses. Now, that's important because she has to complete an anti-hate course, but she wasn't charged with anything race-related. Right? So that in itself tells you, okay, something's wrong. But let me go a step further. She will have a clear criminal record once the courses are completed. You know why that's important? She'll get to vote.
Because if it was the other way around, that'll be a felony.
Absolutely.
Now you can't vote.
Now you can't vote. She will get to vote, which is important because now we go back to the legislation where they're trying to pass these 400 bills of voter suppression. This lady will get to vote.
Yeah.
We know how she's voting. We already know.
Right.
Because we know how she feel about black people. She spit on one.
Right. We know why she was at the Capitol in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah. So she's going to vote, and we know how she's going to vote. These are the kind of people that they're trying to appease. And what do they want? Statues.
Yeah.
What do they want? I don't want you to teach the Ku Klux Klan.
It's bad.
It's bad.
Yeah.
In school.
I don't even want you to teach about Martin Luther King in high school.
Oh, but in Texas, we ain't doing that.
Oh, I know.
Because we're going to remove Martin Luther King and Native Americans from American history.
Facts. Right in front of our face.
Right in our face. So while we were celebrating, this is what they were doing behind the scenes. And to top it off, in Texas, when they voted on this, guess where most of the Democrat congressmen in Texas were? In D.C. trying to fight the voter suppression laws. So they said, oh, why all them guns? Let's vote on this.
Yeah.
Right? They're not here to vote against it. Let's vote on this. And that's what they did. So again, when we talk about, people hear us talk about systemic or systematic, however you want to pronounce it. When we talk about that, you think that that's us just saying that racism exists in the police department and in schools and in finance institutions. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that the system that was devised to keep blacks in a certain place throughout the United States holds racism and discrimination at a high level.
Right.
We can talk about white supremacy all we want to. I mean, you can term it how you want to. We have the proof to say that it lives within those systems. We have the proof. The government being the main system in the way that they treat us, the way that they label us. When you look at the Constitution, most of the amendments that they have are related to blacks. Why? We weren't included in the original Constitution in the sense that we're trying to get us to be recognized today.
Right.
They did not recognize that way at the time. Go back to the Emancipation Proclamation. If you read that in its totality and you understand exactly what's being said there, Thomas Jefferson admitted he had issues with the way Americans viewed blacks. But he didn't talk about it openly.
Right. A lot of these people talked about it privately.
Talked about it privately. Same thing, General Lee.
Yeah.
Talked about it privately. What do we say about silence?
It's agreeing with it.
It's the biggest form of racism you could possibly have. Is that when you know something is wrong and you don't say anything, right? So let's real quick. I want to tap on that real quick too. So when we talk about criminal justice, they say, well, why don't black people help out the police when they come in their neighborhoods, right? Why don't they tell? Why don't they say? Because they're not going to protect that black person,
Right.
okay? So if that black person is now telling the police what happened, you really think that they're going to get enough evidence from that conversation to go arrest the suspect in time to protect that person? No, unless he kills somebody white. If he kills somebody white, they arrest him today. Kill somebody black, we're going to investigate what you told us, man. But in the meantime, he's plotting to kill that lady because she just told on him, right? So we don't trust the police. It's not because we want them to get away with the crime.
Right.
It's because we don't trust the police. You're not going to protect us. You're not going to arrest them. I'm going to have to deal with them later.
Right.
I know that.
Richard Sherman's wife, when she called 911 on him, she said, look, he's drunk. He's belligerent.
Don't shoot him.
When y'all get here, don't shoot him.
Right.
You know, you have to worry about, there was an episode on Empire. I know you guys watch Power and you probably didn't watch Empire, but there was an episode on Power where Cookie went to visit her sister, and her sister had a son that was abusive. And Cookie called the police because he was putting something tough on his mom and on Cookie, and called the police. And Cookie's sister was so mad because she said, you realize they could have shot and killed my son because you called the police. Who do we call when we need help?
Right.
Who do we call? Because the people that we call don't give a fuck about us.
Right.
Who do we call? We know they don't care because of things that they're doing behind the scenes while we're celebrating something that they claim they gave us in Juneteenth Day.
Right.
Right? They don't care about us. They don't care about us, and they've proven it to us every single day. And we're okay because I can buy a house where I want to.
Right.
I can buy any type of vehicle that I want to. My interest rate might be higher, but I can buy whatever I want, and I can get a job making just as much money as our white counterparts. And we think that we're doing something. We think that we've progressed so much further now than we did in the 1950s and the 1960s. And I'm here to tell you, you haven't. We have not.
My opinion on driving while black, I'll speak on that first, is we got to look at history again to understand driving while black. It's always been a key point for white supremacy to control the movements of black people. Going back, we can go back to the slave trade of shackling them down on a ship and to where they can't even turn left or right because you got them piled up on top of each other. We can talk about police started with slave catchers, controlling black movements. You couldn't go from plantation to plantation with your master's permission unless you had a pass. Even if you were a free black person, you had to have a pass to show that you were free to be able to travel on certain roads. Purchasing cars became, well, even before purchasing cars, we look at trains and buses, what was done to discriminatory to keep black people from traveling to certain places. So you try to put them in the worst position possible on those buses and on those trains to stop them from traveling. Because especially on the trains, you will put them in what they call the smoke room, in which all the smoke will go into that particular part of the train to try to stop black people from wanting to travel by train. Even if you purchase what they call a first class ticket, you still had to sit there.
That's right.
But purchasing cars became a new freedom for black people. Especially people after we talked about like the Great Migration where they moved north and they moved west. Cars allowed them to move fluently back to the South or going back to the South to visit family or just traveling the world to see the rest of the world. Cars was their freedom, especially when you talk about a lot of these people didn't own homes, but they could own a vehicle. The vehicle was we still do it today. We dress the vehicle up. We put rims on it. We paint it. You want the vehicle to be an expression of you because a lot of times in history, that was the only thing a black man had. A lot of them slept in their cars because that's all they had. Right. It was a freedom. But unfortunately, with that freedom came the ability to move within white neighborhoods. So even driving through a white neighborhood was forbidden because of what we call racial profiling, as we talked about. Moving through certain counties where we know sundown towns, you couldn't be there for long. You couldn't traveling across state lines. You couldn't just stop at a hotel and say, "Hey, we want to sleep here tonight." Most of the time, they were segregated. You couldn't just stop and get something to eat. Pie. You couldn't just stop and get something to eat. You couldn't just stop and get gas. You had to find a black person in town and say, hey, where's a good place for me to get gas? And they would have to direct you.
That's right.
They even had brochures that cater to black people to say, hey, these are the places you need to stop when you're going. These are the places you don't need to stop. There was oftentimes we're traveling on roads, black people will pull over and go into the woods, and they would sleep in the woods. So because if you were caught on the road at night, you were probably killed or lynched. So they would end up pulling over in the woods and just sleeping in the car. Whole family sleeping in the car. But racial profiling begins as it was a loophole in the Fourth Amendment or around the Fourth Amendment. Mm-hmm. A Fourth Amendment protects your right for search and seizures. And what they did was they can pull you over for minor traffic stops, and by the words of probable cause or reasonable suspicion can lead to search and seizure. So they will pull you over for minor traffic things and say, hey, we smell something, we see something, we suspect something, get out the car, we'll search the car.
That's right.
And like you said, black drivers are 4 to 6 times likely to be stopped more than white drivers. They're also 30% less likely after searches to be carrying anything illegal. Right. So you're stopping black people at a higher rate, searching them at a higher rate, but finding stuff at a lower rate.
Absolutely.
This is the target that black people are faced with. And white America finally got to see it on camera with George Floyd on how police treat you.
Well, hold on, because you said that it's a lower rate of them finding anything.
Lower rate, even though you're searching at a higher rate, it's a lower rate of you finding anything.
What's the opposite of that? How can we get that number up?
Right. So the more searches you do, the more that number goes up.
And with George Floyd, they tried to find ways to say, hey, he was on this.
Right.
They wanted to plant things on him.
So we seen that with George Floyd. We seen it with Rodney King. We seen it.
Rodney King was probably one of the starts.
Right. We seen it a lot of times.
90 miles an hour in a Yugo.
Well, we had this conversation off air that, being pulled over as a teenager, a lot of teenagers don't know their rights.
No. That's right.
So if a cop asks you if they can search your car, you're probably going to let them.
I did.
But not knowing that the officer that you were talking about earlier could have been crooked to where he could have planted something on you and changed you for the rest of your life. This is before dash cams were.
Or you could have had a friend in that car at some other point that could have left something in that car.
Absolutely.
And now it's yours when you allow that officer to search that car. Now
absolutely.
It's yours. So and you had no idea that whatever that is even in the vehicle.
Right.
So a traffic stop can become criminal activity search real fast, especially among African Americans. And we talked about this on another episode, the uncomfortable conversations that black parents have to have with their kids at a certain age. We talked about at an early age when they're going to school. We talked about, when they become adults, but also when they become teenagers and they get that learner's permit going to get that license. That's a different conversation. That if you are pulled over by police, these are the instructions that you need to follow. A lot of white people do not need to have that conversation with your kids. So what does the conversation sound like? Respect them, not respect them because of who they are. Mm-hmm. Respect them for your survival.
Right.
Absolutely.
So keep your hands where they can see them. Make no sudden movements. Don't reach for anything. These are the things that you need to do to stay alive for a simple traffic stop.
Don't forget the yes sir and no sir.
Gotta say yes sir and no sir, because even the respect thing is more about your survival. That maybe they'll calm down if they see that you are respectable. But we had this conversation last week. Our younger cousin in college said they got pulled over, and by a guy sticking his head out the window before the cop gets up there, she pulls her weapon. This is something that 19, 20-year-olds are dealing with at an early age, because when you stop a white person in traffic, it is for traffic. Mm-hmm. That person is a civilian. Mm-hmm. When you stop a black person, it's not for traffic, it's for criminal searches, and they are a threat. When they did surveys on this. This is not stuff we're making up. They did surveys on white police officers, not just based on color, based on name. If the name sounds black, I think that the person that's driving this vehicle is more of a threat. I think that it's more likely that I have to pull my weapon if the person is black or sounds black. It's more of a threat. So when we talk about these conversations of driving while black, number one, it comes from experience. Number two, the numbers don't lie, and the number are disproportionate. And this is something that we see every single day. Police officers are admitting it. They're admitting that when they leave the force, that they got tired of just pulling over blacks and Hispanics because that's who they wanted to pull over.
That was the protocol. That's right. I think I mentioned this on an episode earlier, but when Cameron first got his driver's license, he came by my job. At the time, I was working for a company right in the middle of town. He came by my job. He has gotten his license, got insurance on his car. His uncle Eugene had given him a car, and he left. Probably about 10 minutes later, I get a phone call from him. He got pulled over by the police, and right on Centerville Road, which is on the road by Liberty High School. So I left work and drove out there, and when I got there, I could tell, at this age, Cameron was big boy, working out in the gym and everything. And the police officer pulled me to the side and said, he's really belligerent and talking to me all kinds of ways. And, I think it would be a good idea if you had a conversation with him. At this point, I was probably the most scared that I've ever been in my entire life. Mm-hmm. Now, mind you, the first 12 or 13 years of my life was criminal minded from the age of about 10 or 11. Mm-hmm. So I've seen a lot of things that I should have been scared that I was not. This particular time, I was terrified because I started thinking this cop could have done something to my nephew just by his demeanor and him being a threat because of his size and him being black. And I pulled my nephew to the side. And I vividly remember exactly what I said to him. I won't repeat all the words, but I said, hey, when a police officer pull you over, you should be saying nothing short of yes, sir, and no, sir. Have your hands where you can see them and no body language or movements at all that could seem threatening. Because when you're his size, just putting your arm up could seem like a threat.
Right.
You don't do any of that. And I was so afraid that when I got out of my car to go and talk to him, I didn't even realize, for those that know me, I'm terrified of snakes. I didn't even realize it was a snake that I had just stepped over when I was going. I was so mad, so scared that I didn't even notice the snake until after the fact. And my nephew was like, Uncle Rome, I don't think you're going to get back in the car. It's a snake right there, But I was terrified. Because at that moment, I realized that my nephew's life was in jeopardy. And he had no clue that it was in jeopardy. So at that point, I made sure I had that conversation with him, that tough conversation. I think I tell you guys all the time, we talk about being a black parent might be the toughest thing there is to be in America, especially being a black man. But it's even tougher when you try to teach your kids how to be proud of being black. But being able to come home at night. Right. You want them to be proud. You want them to stand up. But you want them to come home. So how can you do both? You got to educate them. Right. You have to educate them. And you educate them and you say, you can be proud, come home. And then if that person or system did something wrong, then we'll deal with that. But you got to come home first.
Right. And you said something critical was size, can be considered as a threat. And this is something that the police officer said during the George Floyd case. That's right. Was that his size was a factor. So by putting a knee on his neck or them being going with excessive use of force, that took into account his size. So if you can't match with somebody physically, that's going to cause a lot of officers to go to their weapon. That's right. So when we talk about,
let me show you in charge here, boy.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that is the problem with law enforcement is a lot of people can't handle situations, especially how to communicate with black people.
Absolutely.
So this is why for anybody that says black police officers are sellouts, I 100% disagree with you. Because there are black police officers that know how to communicate to black people that can diffuse situations. Not all of them, but some are Sambos, but there are some that know how to do their job, and they're doing that job to be the change that they want to see, especially in the black community. So if an officer pulls you over for traffic, they're not actually required to tell you why they pulled you over. But a lot of black people would like to know why they pulled you over. And a lot of black officers will go ahead and explain to them why. But there are officers who will not, because they want that authority to say it ain't none of your business. Show me your driver's registration, all of those good things.
I'm in charge
step
here,
out,
boy.
Yeah, step out the car. Now, you're not required to step out of the car.
Nope.
But if you watch some of these videos, they will make you step out of the car or pull you out that vehicle. Black officers can diffuse that situation, but we're starting this. White America is starting to see this. Now, they may not care about it, but when the military guy gets pulled over, you're starting to see how black people are treated when they're pulled over, and they're being compliant. We have the right to record.
That's right.
We have the right to record. Well, we're gonna take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. And we are back. Again, go to YouTube, type in the Mighty Motivation Network, subscribe to the YouTube channel, My Unapologetic Perspective on Facebook, CB_kicks on Instagram. Follow them for your latest kicks. Hit them up if you got a certain kicks that you want. Message him and see if he can get it for you, and I'm positive he can deliver. All right, let's jump right back in. Go.
I want to stay with the not necessarily driving while black, because we realize the issue with how they determine and the rate that they're pulling over black drivers and opposed to white drivers is basically racial profiling. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give you a great example of racial profiling. And this just happened 2 days ago. Black woman traveling, I think from Colorado to Fort Worth, Texas on a plane with a 4-year-old white child. And some concerned travelers on the plane notified the authorities that the terminology is important. Notified the authorities that not that something was wrong, but there was a possible child trafficker on the plane. Now, I don't know how you go from something being unusual or something could be wrong to child trafficker.
Right.
In fact, who uses the terminology trafficker? Right. But that's where it went. So the airline, when they got to Fort Worth, Texas, and for those that have watched this podcast, Texas is not one of my favorite states. When you get to Fort Worth, Texas, the airline security detained and questioned this lady. It turns out the 4-year-old white child is her adopted sister. And she has to prove it. They even questioned the 4-year-old. Do you know this lady? Right? You know, you can't make this stuff up.
Right.
But this is what happened just 2 days ago. And it's not the first time. We've saw time and time again, the iPhone is the biggest one, where the white lady accused the 14-year-old black boy of stealing her iPhone, and the dad was there, and she basically tackled the 14-year-old boy. Yeah. Come to find out, she left it in an Uber. Yeah. Right? Profiling. Immediately thinking that it's a black person. Very rarely do you see a white person accusing another white person of these type of crimes. Uh-huh. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. Show me the evidence. Right. I can show the evidence where it happens, where the white person is blaming the black. There's something interesting I heard a commentator say just the other day after this event, and then we could talk about so many other ones. One of the most common reasons black people are stopped by authorities is because they're black. Mm-hmm. Just being black. We joke about that, but that's the one criteria that you must meet, is that you're black. The second is because they are in close proximity to whites. Mm-hmm. Trayvon Martin. I know a lot of people have forgotten about that situation with Trayvon, but he was a black and he was in close proximity to whites. And they figured he was a threat figured he didn't belong there. How many times in the last 3 months have we heard about a black guy being arrested at his own home because he lived in a predominantly wealthy neighborhood, and they thought that he shouldn't have been there. He didn't own the house there. Why are you there? You're breaking in. He lived there. This happens all the time. So when we talk about because they're in close proximity to whites, we're not just talking about legitimate location area. We're talking about something that you talked about last week. We're also talking about privilege.
Right.
So because white privilege is starting to diminish, all of a sudden white people feel like we need to have that distance again. They've already tried this once, ladies and gentlemen, when they created what is called middle class. And for most of you, you're not middle class. So when you hear them talk about rich, middle class, and poor,
You're still poor.
And they don't include that other category called working class, you're in the poor category. Okay? If you're not making $100,000 a year, you're not middle class, you're poor. Okay? So when we talk about proximity, they're talking about that privilege because it's decreasing. And they want to increase that. So how do you increase that? You start putting blacks back into that place that the history books place us in.
Right.
As being insubordinate, inferior.
I keep saying
and not just the minority.
Showing you who in charge, boy.
Showing you who in charge.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about the reason that this continues to happen is because they're trying to get that white privilege back. They want to take certain things from blacks. And it starts with your vote. I can't get away from that because we talk about the equalizer being education. But in terms of change, the equalizer is voting. And if you can't vote, you can't change things. Okay? Think about what we're talking about with Black history being taught in schools. Based on what? What are we doing to be able to make that happen? Interest. And then you have folks voting on it. Well, when you talk about the school board, how many blacks are on the Bedford County School Board?
I think it's like one, maybe.
Yeah, I think
it's so few we don't even know.
Yeah.
You know, but if you think about that, how do you think that you're going to make a difference if you can't vote? If we're not putting black people in areas where they can make a difference, we can go all the way back to a previous podcast where we talk about there's many forms of segregation. You brought up New Orleans and how it's 65, 70% black, and yet you still have these Confederate statues. You know why?
Because they don't run anything in there.
Segregation. You have blacks living in an area, but they don't control anything about that area. Segregation continues. Where there's segregation, there's oppression, there's racism, there's discrimination, there's injustice, there's inequality. That's how you get those things.
Absolutely. So even with driving while black, we know that there, especially from the past 6-7 years, we know driving while black is not just a thing. It's also jogging while black.
That's right.
Walking while black.
Fighting while black.
Yeah, fighting while black. Anything that you can think of that deals with being African American. If white America can't see that we live in two different Americas,
absolutely,
there is no convincing you. And honestly, I'm done trying to convince them. I'm talking to people who are listening that understand, because it's important that we don't, again, fall into these narratives that they're trying to create. The narratives that slavery wasn't all bad.
Slave masters weren't all bad.
Right. The Ku Klux Klan isn't morally wrong. We see things like we see, like you talked about, they're always using ways to combat what black people are saying by, number one, either saying that, well, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, like you said last week. But even talking about Robert E. Lee, they use a black Sambo of Robert E. Lee's to say, see, this black person said it, so it has to be true. The same way they do. What's my man's name? Is it Roland? The guy with the
Roland Martin?
With the Fox show that's a Sambo. I can't remember what his name was, but they use him. They use Candace Owens. They use Stacey Dash. They use whatever black people they can to support their agenda, to say, hey, at least one black person agrees with us, so everybody agrees with us.
That's right.
So you have to understand the root. You have to understand white supremacy to understand the things that they are doing today. So that's why we talk about knowing your history, because what is happening is nothing new. It's nothing different from what happened in the past.
It don't even look different.
History might not repeat itself, but it dang sure rhymes.
Right.
You know what
Absolutely.
I'm saying? When you look at Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin, when we look at the cases of voter suppression back to the civil rights movement, everything is just cycling back around, because white supremacy, whenever they feel like there is a immediate threat to their control in this country, they will use whatever force is necessary, like you said, especially to seize that control. Number one is education. Number two is voting. Those are the two key components that white supremacy will use to keep their control over this country. So it's important that black people continue to learn about true history, which is why we do this podcast. And I had an individual say to me that, isn't it still considered racism or racial profiling if a black person goes into a white neighborhood and you stop them because they look suspicious for being in a white neighborhood or being in the area of a white neighborhood or driving through a white neighborhood? Well, I'm from such and such area and I couldn't go in the hood because I'm white. They'll be like, why are you over here? My response to that is, I'm black and I can't go over there.
Right.
Because black communities, when you look at projects and hoods, what is they are very overprotective of what they have there. So if there's no reason for you to be over there, you don't know anybody over there,
black or white,
police or not, whatever the case may be, they're suspicious because they don't trust anybody in them areas.
Absolutely.
When you come from poverty in a certain aspect, there's just certain things that you don't trust. Now, if a white person was jogging in a white neighborhood, nobody would think anything of it because they're white. A black person does not discriminate against you because you're white or black. It's just a simple, we don't know you. We ain't never seen you over here. What are you doing over here? Are you the police? Or are you coming to kill us? You coming to rob us? What you doing over here? That is the key concept. That has nothing to do with racial profiling. It has everything to do with protection because we don't know you.
I'll actually ask this question. How many white people have been detained and questioned by police because they were in a black neighborhood?
They probably gonna warn you and say you probably not even want to be over here.
To know if they ever stop there, hey, you just look suspicious. You realize it's a black neighborhood,
right?
And opposed to how many blacks have been detained and questioned in white neighborhoods.
I'll say this: if that did happen, it was, why are you over here? Who did you buy it from?
Oh, absolutely. Why did you come down here?
Right.
Yeah, because obviously you came there for a reason.
You give us that. You go on, but tell us who you got it from.
Absolutely.
Right.
So just to be detained in the black community because you're white, because they're concerned about your safety or whether you're a suspect to break in somebody's house or something, probably never happens.
Right.
It only happens to blacks and white communities. Hell, it happens to blacks and black communities.
Right, absolutely.
So, which we'll talk about that a little bit on our next episode when we talk about gun violence, is that also blacks are more likely to be detained and questioned even when they're not driving. Thus, you get the stop, search, and frisk
right.
Back in New York. So obviously, these are things that have been put in place to control the black population and the movements of the black individuals. As you said, and you said, this is something that's been a practice in America. And we said has been a practice. Doesn't mean that it stopped. It still continues.
Right.
It's practice even today.
Right. And there still has not been any bills passed to actually combat that.
Absolutely.
George Bush was talking about getting rid of it, in which he did not incorporate anything to stop it. So we know that police officers, retired police officers, say yes, it was under our authority to stop blacks and Hispanics more because they were more likely to be suspects in any type of crime that has been committed. So when you look at that, when police are telling you that we discriminate, we racially profile based off of our quotas to either ticket or arrest, is based off the presumption that we believe that they committed a crime, specifically by the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. This is something that has not stopped throughout history. And there is no convincing certain people, because we know they have their ways of manipulation or control that they're not willing to give up. And even if you bring this information towards media or people, you have people like Donald Trump, who says that those statues is history and we should not let them go. You have people like George Bush, who said the exact same thing. You have people in those states like New Orleans, Virginia, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, who control the council boards and the government that says, no, we're not going to remove these statues. These are the type of people that you're dealing with. So if you do not control any of your economic basis of your community, this is going to continue to happen. Absolutely. This is one of the reasons, like we talked about on the previous episode, why the Black Panther Party did what they did. The Black Panther Party's number one thing was to patrol the police.
That's right.
Because they were stopping black people for what we call the search and seizure things for racial profiling. That's right. So they will pull up to make sure that you were doing your job correctly, to not detain an African American for no particular reason at all, or plant something on them. So you have to be very careful when you're dealing with people who try to manipulate the system and use it for their control, which a lot of police officers out here attempt to do.
And before you close, I just want to say that, we're not talking about all white people. We're talking about white supremacy.
Right.
When you see the Black Lives Matter, I was watching a documentary, and I was watching white supremacy come defend these statues.
Of course.
And they were armed. They had the guns over their shoulder. They had them in their hip, and they just standing out there. The cops standing there with them. But when the black people showed up, all they had was a bullhorn. They didn't have no guns. Mm-hmm. Because if let's be honest, truth be told, if they would have showed up with guns, it would have been
some dead black folks.
Right.
Yeah. Not only that, but it also would have been, are you authorized to carry them? If you're not, we locking all y'all up.
That's a different thing, because white people with guns is practicing their rights. Black people with guns is a threat.
Right. And then, and when everything was going on with what happened in Minnesota, I seen a couple people in Bedford say, well, if they go to the Walmart and riot down there, then I'm gonna be down there to defend Walmart. Look, so you telling me that the shit in Walmart is more important than a man's life?
Right. Absolutely.
And y'all know we love to quote movies here. So, like Training Day said, I'm gonna come back and burn this motherfucker down.
That's right.
Right. And I'll let you close, Pops, because
I just want to. We're going to get into some things next week or next episode, where we're going to talk about guns and how they play a major role in black communities. Mm-hmm. But in doing so, this definitely relates to what we're talking about, because guns and rights to bear firearms is a major voting concern for white Americans and Republicans. And it's important because the gun violence, we use Chicago as a quick example. When Donald Trump was running for president, and I mentioned this to you guys a couple of weeks ago, when he was running for president, he said, we have a plan that we can put in place that will stop the violence in Chicago immediately.
Right.
As far as I know, he was president for 4 years and he didn't stop any of the gun violence that happened in Chicago. Why? It's black on black crime.
Right.
Okay. But what they did do is they continued to pass laws that allow people to carry firearms openly. It's going to be like the Wild Wild West. Eventually, everybody's going to have a sidearm on the side. So I want people to take particular interest in voting and understanding, if you want to make a difference, if you want to create some type of avenue that's going to give some justice and equality to racial profiling at some point, and justice for blacks in situations where we deserve it, like this white woman spitting this black lady's face, this black lady traveling with her 4-year-old white sister. If you want those things to stop, you got to do it at the legislation level.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, which means you have to vote. Keep in mind, they're trying to suppress that. They're trying to stop you from voting,
Mm-hmm.
which means now they're trying to limit the ways that we're able to stop the very things that we're trying to stop.
Right.
So once that happens, and it's going to happen if you don't get out and vote, it's going to happen. It's going to start happening at a faster rate to where we talk about it on the podcast. A lot of people are probably sitting there watching this and going, how does this apply to me?
Right.
You're going to find out. If it hasn't applied to you yet, it will. You mentioned Candace Owens, who I think is one of the most intelligent Black people that I've ever heard in politics. How do you think that she ended up taking the views of the Republican side? I often ask myself that question. They gave her the one thing that they don't typically give Black people.
A platform.
They gave her a platform and respect.
Mm-hmm.
You're not like them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be fooled into thinking that they like you just so you can agree with their agenda, because that's what they do. Donald Trump said, if you want to have a better life as a Black person, you should vote for him, not Joe Biden. He is the least racist person that he knows. Least means you are.
Right.
And Joe Biden said that if you like chicken, then you should vote.
I just think that we have to do a better job at understanding how we can stop these things from happening. It starts with awareness, and that's what we're doing. Giving you the awareness, giving you the platform, the discussions, giving you the information. But you got to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do the work. You got to get out and vote. You got to understand the issues. You can't say they gave us this, we're happy. You can't be content with what's going on right now in your personal life, because eventually, if you have kids, if you have grandkids, they're going to be the ones that suffer. Trust me. It's already happening. My generation dropped the ball. We had people like Bob Carson, and we had people like Henry Carey that were talking about some of the same things we're talking about today. When I was a kid, we blew it off. My generation blew it off. Guess what? Now it's coming back for your generation, because we blew it off in my generation. We can't blow it off. We apologize for blowing it off in my generation. I apologize to Bob Carson, Henry Carey, people like them that stood up and was trying to make a difference in Bedford County, and we did not listen. It's time for everybody to start listening now.
My closing is, be the change you want to see, but you got to put yourself in a position to create the change. And the problem with Black America, we talk about white America all the time. Let's talk. The problem with Black America is we like to correlate people with being sellouts, correlate people with being a puppet. Understand something. In order to create the change, you have to infiltrate places that can be the change. I'll be the spook that's sat by the door. I have no problem doing that, because we need to stop the racial profiling from white supremacy officers. We need Black officers there.
Absolutely.
In order to stop the white supremacy teaching in our school, we need more Black teachers who can stand up and teach Black history, teach U.S. history, and incorporate Black history into it. We need more people who can, again, like you talked about, be on the school board and be able to vote to have some of these things taken out or put into place. You have to have people in position to vote for that can make changes so we can have the right to practice some of the things that we're talking about. So without having these people in the position, how can we expect change? So it's up to the people who talk about the problems to be the solution as well.
That's right.
Put yourself in a position to create the change, and you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. It's going to take more than one Black police officer in our county to be able to create change. Shout out to all our Black officers, the ones that's going through training now, because they understand to create that change, to create police and community relationship, you need somebody that looks like you, need somebody that knows how to communicate to you, and need somebody that comes from where you come from to be able to create that correlation. So without without infiltrating the system, you'll never change the system. And that's one thing that white America banks on.
That's right.
They're doing the white supremacy in policing to discourage people from becoming police officers, black people especially. Because guess what? If black officers ain't around, they're going to do whatever they want to do.
That's right.
Guess what? If black teachers ain't in school, they're going to talk about whatever they want to talk.
That's right.
That's why when it came to the schooling online last year that they did, a lot of parents was listening like, wait a minute, what that teacher talking about? Because if there's nobody around to correct them, there's nobody around to see what they're saying, this is going to be Bible or truth to them.
That's right.
And it's going to teach your kids that is the truth, which is the problem we're having. You have to have people in position, principals. Shout out to all our black principals, teachers, police officers, politicians, bankers, people who can say yes to giving you a loan. We talk about not being able to get a loan. How about giving some people in position that can say, yeah, they qualify. Put them in this neighborhood. That's right. We need those people around. You can't change the system if you don't infiltrate the system. Love y'all. Peace.